Hello and welcome to World Talks with me, Ashim Kumar. Baltic and Polish leaders are warning that Russia could attempt a limited military or hybrid provocation against NATO's eastern flank, targeting critical infrastructure and testing ally unity. To discuss the risks and possible responses, we are joined by Reuben F. Johnson. He's Director of Research at the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Reuben, welcome back to TP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure as always, sir. So, what's new about this? Russia's been provoking NATO at its edges and even deeper in, pretty much before the war even started in Ukraine. What's new about what's happening now?
Well, let's talk about two things. First of all, let's talk about some scenarios, but then let's talk about why it might be different and what's motivating Putin. So first of all, yes, we know the foreign minister Sikorsky and others have warned that the Russians might create some kind of a provocation. They would orchestrate something that would look like a drone strike, and they would say, aha, that drone didn't come from Ukraine like all the others. This one came from a NATO country. And then they would launch some kind of a limited attack into the territory, either one of the Baltic states or through the Suwalki Gap or somewhere. They'd go, 3 or 4 or 5 miles, and then they would stop and say, okay, this territory is ours. If you want it back, you're going to have to fight for it. If you don't want to fight for it, then we have to negotiate. And then they would roll out the usual litany of maximalist demands that they've been asking from the Ukraine war. We all know them, no more aid for Ukraine. They get to keep all the territory they've stolen and then some, et cetera, et cetera. Another option is what you mentioned about critical infrastructure, some type of a cyber attack, some type of a event could be created. Like, for example, yesterday, I believe there were 9 different airplanes at Heathrow Airport which had to cancel their flights or they had to turn around because of technical faults. And I don't know if we know yet if that was a cyber attack, if that was caused by something else, but those are the types of scenarios the Russians would like to generate. And they would like to generate it to see, number one, how much resolve we have, and number two, to see how our institutions will react, so they can determine points at which they can manipulate the process. So that's what might happen.
Okay, well, let's take the first example or first scenario first, often called a false flag, where the Russians create a crisis where there isn't one and then use that as an excuse for invading. Why haven't they done that so far?
Well, that's an extremely risky move, because that's an Article 5 violation if you move into another country's territory. And so far, Putin has scrupulously avoided attacking NATO because he doesn't want a NATO response. So that's something that he would only do if he felt that his allies would be behind him. And if you've seen this interview taken not long ago with Admiral Rob Bauer, who was the head of the NATO Military Committee from the Netherlands. He's now retired. And he said flat out, Putin will not attack NATO unless he has the permission of his Chinese backers. And he is most definitely in the junior partner position with the Chinese. He depends on them way too much to ever jeopardize them coming to a point and saying, oops, sorry, you've gone too far, you've lost our support.
Okay, so why would the Chinese back it now then? Because they've got a lot to lose if there is a full-scale war with NATO. They've got the economic links with many NATO countries that they don't want to lose.
That's right. That's why they're backing him now. That's why, as long as he doesn't violate Article 5, as long as he doesn't use a nuclear weapon, they're in. And they're in, number one, they have Putin over a barrel, flat out. Number two, as you correctly point out, they've got the economic clout now, and they want to keep that with foreign countries, and they don't want to jeopardize it in any way. But also, the Chinese sort of like this this situation we're in now, where the West is pouring weapons and assistance and money into Ukraine, and they make the cynical calculation that every missile, every dollar, every bullet, every whatever that we send to Ukraine is something that can't be used against them if they decide to take on Taiwan. And the Chinese have a long-term plan. There's just been a story this week that says their people, their intelligence services are inside of Russia, and they're openly cultivating relationships with people in the Russian leadership. And they are actively planning for what happens when Putin dies or deposed or is deposed or both. They're already trying to figure out who's going to run the country, and they can see it coming. And this gives them the time to move their chess pieces on the board and maneuver to be prepared for that.
Okay, now let's move to the other side of the coin, and that's NATO's response. What would they do? I mean, you know, Russia's often said that basically the only time they would use a nuclear weapon would be if the motherland, Russia, was under threat. So if NATO invades Russia, then surely that's what they're risking, aren't they?
Well, if the motherland is under threat, if Putin defines that, that could be the Russian Olympic team not being allowed to participate in the games. I mean, his definitions of threats to the motherland don't normally match up with what intelligent, sane people in the West would say are defensible definitions. But again, the different NATO countries, that's always a problem. That's what the Russians are looking for. I mean, we know for a fact that certain countries in the alliance would not be very anxious to send troops. They might send aircraft, they might fly missions, they might provide intelligence, but getting involved, one-on-one with the Russian military up close and personal, there are some NATO countries that won't want to do that.
So what options do we have? I mean, the Baltics clearly seem to be at high risk. They're small, easy to swallow up, easy to invade. Is that the Achilles heel of NATO at the moment?
Well, I would say if you're talking about on the ground, yes, they would seem to be easy prey. Although you have to ask the question, do the Russians have a unit which is trained up and prepared enough to make such an incursion? I sometimes think the Achilles heel are some of the internal politics within NATO countries. I mean, we've seen a resurgence in popularity of the far-right party in France under Marine Le Pen, and her people are openly pro-Russian. If they were to take a majority in parliament, they would immediately cut all of the aid for Ukraine. Germany has similar problems with the AfD, and the Russians know that, and they have all kinds of means on the ground of trying to manipulate public opinion and manipulate internal politics. And that's what they'll do in the absence of having the kinetic capability to actually do anything substantial on the ground.
Okay, well, I mean, basically hacking and cyber techniques have been used for a while by Russia to influence public perception and opinion. How successful would you say they have been in Europe and basically across NATO?
Well, they've been very successful because of how they operate. The people doing the hacking and the cyber attacking are, by and large, they are not people that are inside of the Russian government. The Russian government, when it needs them, retains the services of over 1 million Russian programmers who work for about 30 or 40 different Russian cybercrime gangs. And the Russian government says, hey, you people can do whatever you want. You can break into the National Bank of Bangladesh and steal $200 million, and we won't come after you. We will give you cover. When people come to complain, we'll say, we're as shocked as you are, but we don't know where they are. We'll feign ignorance. But in return for us giving you the cover that allows you to continue criminal activities, when we need the ob job done on behalf of the Russian state, you have to be there at the ready. So that's using, and it's not the only type of criminal organizations the Russians use, but that's just one example. they do this sort of thing all the time. And that's something that democratic countries who believe in the rule of law can't do. Poland can't go out and hire a whole, 1 million criminals to go take on the Russians and do all sorts of dirty tricks. That's something the Russians do. And they know that. They know that's a weakness, and they'll play that to the hilt.
Right. Okay. So apart from that, rule of law, quote, weakness, as you describe it, how well prepared is NATO for these kinds of threats? And I'm sure they'll increase, won't they?
The answer is not enough. I've been to a bunch of these cybersecurity conferences, and here's the big question. I know I've said this on this station before with someone, I can't remember who, but if you attend one of these cybersecurity seminars, whatever, and someone asks the question, okay, what sort of a attack in the electronic cybersphere, what sort of attack in that sphere would be severe enough to mandate a kinetic response? And if you ask that question of 25 very learned experts in a room, in some conference somewhere, you will get 25 different answers. We have no unified opinion, no unified position, no unified policy. And it gets very murky. And the Russians play on that. They love ambiguity because they use that to their advantage.
Right, certainly a grey zone, very much so, as many would say Article 5 is as well. Reuben Johnson, as always, thank you so much for your analysis. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, sir, again.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
you too.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.